Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Find a Moment podcast, where we navigate the space between ideals and everyday life. We are your hosts, Gretchen Roberts and Jennifer Ford, and we look forward to finding a moment with you today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Find a Moment podcast. We are continuing in our series on honest parenting, and we hope that you were able to listen in on our first episode where we just did a little introduction and kind of explained our heart behind this series and kind of jumped right into the deep end of the pool there of parenting and ideas and things. So, Jennifer, do you want to introduce what we are going to discuss today?
I'd love to. So we are talking about myths and misconceptions, and then also some mistakes that we've made, and we're going to just continue the thread of honesty and vulnerability in this conversation, just like we did with our introduction, which I kind of like the title of that one, Saying the Quiet Things Out Loud, because I think we're going to get kind of gutsy. There's a lot of things in the parenting sphere, particularly Christian parenting, and we mentioned this in the intro, that we maybe don't feel like we have permission to say. And sometimes those are convictions. Sometimes those are things that are maybe a bit controversial. Sometimes they're things that maybe even people have used scripture to justify. And so we are just at this season of our lives. Gretchen, you said in our last episode, you're in your 50s. I'm a couple years shy of that. And I feel like if you add our ages together, it's 100.
Right.
It's 100. And I feel like we're at that time where we kind of say, we're just going to do it.
Yes.
And that's okay.
Unfiltered 50s.
Right. Whether it's book titles that we feel like need to just really be discarded or shredded, or whether it's just kind of some ideas or narratives that have somehow persisted through Christian parenting and just parenting in general, we are going to really stick our necks out there this time and really speak our convictions. And Gretchen, I love the way that you articulated how you felt like God was calling you to be an advocate for children and for mothers. In our introduction, you were saying that you were encountering things and you asked the Lord, was God asking you to speak out against these things and to use your voice for that? And you said that the Lord said, I want you to be for things, not against things. And I remember years ago, many years ago, like early in our friendship, you said that the Lord, this was probably in a mom heart group setting, you said you really felt like the Lord was calling you to be for the mommies. And that has always stuck with me because I think it's very easy for us to be for the children. Like who's not for children?
Right.
I'm for children. Like that's a very easy thing to stand for, but who stands for the mommies? Because a lot of times the mommies make decisions that we don't all agree with, and it's so easy to judge.
Yes.
So I love that position and that idea of like, if we are for the mommies, then we are also for the children.
Yes.
So starting this episode, we're going to talk about some myths and misconceptions. We're going to lump those together. The first one we've got in our notes is that we can do it all ourselves. So raise your hand if you can do it all yourself as a mom or as a parent. There's no hands going up right now. And I think sometimes we trick ourselves into thinking that. My girls would say, I have teenage girls, and they say, I just gaslight myself into thinking that I'm up against a clock, or I'm just, it's a way of like this mental trickery. And I wonder if the people who feel like they can do it all themselves really just don't feel like they have anybody they can depend on. And so that's why we tell ourselves that. Gretchen, is that something that you have ever kind of found yourself thinking like, I'm fine, I've got this, I can do this myself?
Yes.
Have you ever fallen into that?
And I think a lot of it goes to our personalities too. And, if we are kind of that perfectionist mentality that, are you someone who reorganizes the dishwasher after someone else loads it? You may think you can do it all yourself or have that expectation. So I think a lot of that is our personality and kind of different personalities of whether or not you are willing to ask for help. But I do think that there is this, maybe it's an unspoken narrative or unspoken expectations in our culture that, you are supposed to grow up and be independent and be on your own and have your own things in your own house. And, there's it's almost like seen as a sign of weakness if you rely on others to help you. And so I think we fight against receiving help. And I think women feel the pressure, I feel like in general, to do all the things and do all the things well. And, whether you work outside the home or you are home full time with your kids or it's some kind of mix of those two, I think in general, most women feel that pressure. And I know that I did. And I felt like I needed to be able to cook all the meals and make all the fun snacks and be creative and have a clean home and like have things organized. And my children needed to listen to me and joyfully obey. And so I just had these expectations, and I don't know how much of it is from, like I said, personality, from culture, from the narrative that we're given, but I definitely felt that. It was hard to ask for help, I think, especially when my children were all younger and home, because for one, I kind of didn't know what help I needed. And I think there were a lot of times I just felt overwhelmed and I couldn't really articulate. Because my husband has this, he says this all the time, which is such a gift. But he'll say, how can I help you? How can I help you? How can I help you? And so he says it a lot. And there are a lot of times I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
Just look around and do something.
Right.
I can't even put it into words, So I think that was a lot of my difficulty, probably when I had so many young children at home, was just being able to articulate what I needed. And probably looking back, and we can maybe talk about this with mistakes too, looking back, I needed to really just lay down a lot of those expectations because my children weren't expecting the house to be clean all the time. My husband wasn't expecting the house to be clean all the it was me that was expecting the baseboards to be clean and there not to be a crumb on the floor and all of those kind of things. So in hindsight, alluding to mistakes, I wish I would have laid down a lot of false expectations or unrealistic expectations. And that probably would have helped me to be able to do the things I needed to do. But we alluded to it in the first episode too of, historically we were in a physical community of people around, whether it was family or friends and things in neighborhoods where moms were helping each other more and aunts and grandmas and, different people were stepping in and we're living life kind of with you on a daily basis. So our culture is definitely different. And there may be, which we could look at other cultures and see, I'm sure there are other cultures around the world where it is a multi-generational and people are helping as a community, hands-on daily basis kind of thing. Jennifer, do you have another myth or misconception?
I have a list, actually. One that I had also made a note of is that if we can just get it right, then we're not going to have any more issues. And so this kind of points to the formula idea that we talked about. And Sally Clarkson talks a lot about this too. Like there is no formula. In our introduction, we were talking about just the dynamics of individual children and their personalities and their wiring and their birth order and then the dynamics and the parents and all of that. There is no formula that's going to work for every child, for every family. It's just not possible. And then also I feel like some of that is just our flesh, like our desire to, have an if-then situation. If I do this, then this is the result. And then if you don't get the result, then you start thinking, well, I did the performance wrong or the behavior wrong, whatever it was. I didn't follow the steps right. And then you go back and you reread the chapter and then I follow the steps again. I think I did it right this time. And she's still not doing it just makes yourself crazy. You make yourself crazy. And I think that is, we have to really have wisdom with expectations with people, with children, with these unformed little people who have their own minds and their own immaturities and their own needs. We forget a lot of times that a child's behavior is really just expressing a need and they don't know how to manage that. They've got big feelings and they're becoming aware of the world more every day. And that can be really overwhelming. We forget.
Yes.
That it's hard work to be a little one. It's hard. And so instead of treating what we would maybe perceive as problems with our children, usually it's attitude and behavior, right? Like those two things, I feel like that kind of sums a lot of our concerns up. Then if we reduce it to that, then we're kind of forgetting the personhood
Yes.
of the child. And I have never found anything with children that really works that black and white. Like,
Right.
if I do this, then this happens.
Because that is just more transactional and less
Yes.
relational. And humans, we are too complex to work as a transaction. I mean, it doesn't work in marriage. It doesn't work in friendship. Like,
Right.
I don't know why we think because I'm the authority, I'm the parent, then I should be able to do this and you do that, or I
Right.
say this and you do that. And
Right.
not that there isn't obedience, but it's much more relational than transactional.
Right.
I think. Yeah.
When I think of transaction, it makes me think too of like old covenant parenting versus new covenant parenting, and viewing the old covenant way being that for every sin, for every mistake, for every fault, there has to be some sacrifice of some kind to even the scales back out. And that's not relationship. That truly is just like what you said. That's a transaction. And it kind of gives you as a parent, okay, well, if my child does this, they get a timeout for this long, or, whatever it is. It kind of gives you the illusion that you are fixing the problem because you've got this planned response. If this thing happens, then this is what I do. And maybe that provides some consistency there. Like your child knows, well, if I do this, and then this other consequence happens. But I really push back on the idea that those types of like behavior management, I would really push back on the effectiveness of that, because I feel like I was very consistent with things like that for a long time with both of our girls, and the fruits of it just did not. It just, there were possibly good fruits in some areas, like maybe the behavior modified in a direction that I wanted it to, but then it created other relationship issues or a lack of trust. And above all, like one of our action steps from our introduction episode was wanting listeners to think what has been informing your parenting philosophy and how are you operating? Like if someone were to look from the outside in, what would they say your goals are, and are you achieving those goals? And a lot of times I think we would say our goals are to have an established relationship of trust and respect, with our mutual respect with our children. But I don't know that that's always what someone looking from the outside in would observe. And I even find that in talking to our girls now. One of them just was with a group of 6 girls for an extended period of time over this past weekend. And so they just spent a lot of time sharing really deep personal things and hard things. And I love that they feel comfortable enough to do that. But then when our daughter came home and was kind of debriefing with me, she was saying, Mom, you have no idea what some of these girls deal with at home. Their moms don't care. Their moms punish them with extra chores, and they don't spend time talking to them, and they don't listen, and they just don't see that they are people. And that's for teenagers. And I feel like, wow, how could you have a teen who's in a body, a young woman walking around your house and not have it just kind of hit you in the face? Like, this is a person. This is someone with feelings, with emotions, with value, with worth, with needs. So I don't know. I feel like I just kind of jumped across a couple of the things that I've got in my notes here, but I feel like personhood, when we acknowledge the personhood of a child, it helps us maybe acknowledge that formulas don't work.
Right.
And that you don't have to respond to every mistake with some form of consequence or discipline. A lot of times kids already know that they made a mistake. If they don't, then that's just a little conversation. It doesn't have to be a lecture. But that was something else that I put in my notes, is that not every perceived mistake needs a consequence. It just doesn't.
And like you have said, like not everything that they're doing is a willful act of rebellion or manipulation. And,
Right.
I have read that in some of the Christian parenting books, that babies are manipulating you. And I just think, oh, no, babies are not manipulating you. They are hungry and sleepy and need their diaper changed and need connection and love and to see your face. So I completely agree. And I also think I love the idea of not everything needs immediate correction. And I think especially in the toddler years, you could spend your entire day correcting, and then you're just at a place of it just kind of breeds this like negativity of just all I'm doing is correcting. I think one important thing for young children is redirection. And maybe that redirection involves a snack. Maybe that redirection involves sleep. Maybe that redirection involves you pulling them into your lap and reading a story. I think a lot of the behavior issues with a young child needs redirection. And one of the things that my husband and we did not want when they were little to feel like our family had a whole long list of rules. And we didn't want it to be, you don't do this, you don't do this, you don't do this. I felt like that is just so much negativity of a place to start from. And so we ended up developing like our family ways. And then it was so fun to read in Sally Clarkson's books, because they actually have a book called The 24 Family Ways, where their family had 24 ways that they are, and we had 6. And so some of our ways were, we lead with love. We always, always, always tell the truth. We are good stewards. We value and we share. We are kind and gentle. And so instead of coming from a place of saying we don't hit, it was we're kind and gentle. And so often with younger kids, it is just a redirection and a reminding them of the ways that we are as our family. It reminds me a lot of like our identity and our education series.
I was about to say the same thing, the identity language. We are.
Yes.
We putting on those good things.
Yes. And it's establishing your family culture, because our family culture is going to look different than your family culture. And especially having a house with a lot of boys, like just the energy and the projectiles tend to be a lot different than in a home that maybe doesn't have a lot of boys. So you are going to develop your own family culture. So thinking of who are you as a mom? And, we don't want to always refer, I think, Jennifer, you made such a good point as we were talking about this episode about we know not everyone that we listen to or that is listening is married, or, do you want to elaborate some on that, kind of your conviction about that?
Yeah. So I know that we talked in our first episode about like having conversations with our spouse, for example. And then as I was just I actually listened back to the episode in full twice, because I just really wanted to have it in my mind, really all of the things that we were kind of opening this with, because I take it so seriously. Gretchen, I know you do too. And I mean, anybody that's listening to a podcast on parenting takes it seriously. So, but we have to also acknowledge that there's people in so many different walks of life and who have so many different experiences, whether it's divorce, maybe you're currently separated, maybe you're widowed, maybe you're a blended family. There are so many different configurations of family. And so if we say spouse, if we say married, please know that we still know that you're there. Even if you don't fall into that category, we see and we know and we care about your individual situation. So if we do happen to say those things, please know that we are not forgetting you in this conversation.
So in light of that, just establishing your own family culture and the ways that you want to be and just articulating those, it gives such a grounding for your children over the years. And it gives you that place to redirect. It reminds me of, we had back in I think I've shared my vinyl days where I used my vinyl cutter for all the things. So we had our family ways, and I had done them in vinyl lettering, and they were on the wall in the kitchen. And I had this beautiful image one time of, I was holding one of my toddlers, and I picked him up, and I was reading with him and pointing as I read each family way with him. And it just gave me such a picture of parenting of, I am holding you and I'm holding you up so you can see what I'm reading to you, and I'm reading it to you and pointing with my finger the words I'm reading. And that is kind of what parenting is, right? We are holding them up. We're instructing and teaching and training until they walk in the kitchen on their own, read the family ways for themselves. So it was just such a beautiful picture to me of knowing I'm holding you up, and one day you're going to be running through this kitchen and you can read them all on your own, and you're going to be living them out in the big world by yourself. So it will happen, and I think it can feel in those young years of the constant redirection, it can feel like it's never going to happen, but it will. But I think that goes to another myth or misconception, is that as a Christian parent, you should have perfectly obedient children. You should have children who obey you the first time, which I think first time obedience is another myth, misconception, and chain that is put on Christian parents.
I was thinking of some other more explicit words. It's a burden. That
yes.
expectation is a burden. That message is a burden.
Yes.
Adults don't obey the first time. Can we talk about brain development in young
Right.
children? First time obedience is not possible unless there is such a significant reward to their little brains, whether it's dopamine or chocolate or whatever it is. First time obedience, we have to let that go.
Yes.
We just have to let it go. The brain development that controls response and self-governance, all of that.
Decision making.
Yes. The brain is not even fully developed until mid-20s.
Yes.
And we're expecting tiny little people to obey the first time. I cannot.
And have the attitude of, if they don't, they're manipulating me. Like,
Right.
we have to throw that out.
You go get them. You take their hands in your hands. You bend down on their level. You look in their little eyes and you say, I know you want that right now. And that's hard. I get it. I remember feeling like that. Sometimes I feel like that now. I'm sorry. But I love you, and we're still going to go do whatever.
Yes.
Fill in the blank.
And I think there is a belief in a lot of us that we think, because the brain isn't developed in these young children, that we shouldn't explain things and use our words and explain it just like you did. But even if they aren't understanding everything you're saying, the fact that you are taking the time to explain it, there are parts of it that they do understand, and they understand your tone. They understand that you are using adult, words. You're not, you're treating them with personhood as a human, you're respecting them. And so I love that even though they may not totally get it, they are receiving so much more than just your words.
And there's a physical connection.
Yes.
And a co-regulation that happens when a child is not cooperating, especially if they're getting really emotional and tantruming or whatever. Your presence and your low tone and your gentle touch and your eye contact, you are showing them, you are connecting yourself to them, and you are providing a source of regulation. Because their little bodies, they can't do that. Especially if they're hungry, especially if they're tired.
Yes.
And I'll just say right now, I can't go to the grocery store at night, because if people are in there fussing at their children that are crying, and my heart aches, because I feel like, oh my word, that baby is hungry. Oh my word, that child just needs to go to bed. And then I remember, what if the mama has been at work all day and this is her first opportunity that she's had? Like, it's so easy. Like, I even catch myself like, maybe this is a mistake that I make in judging that other people's decisions. That who in their right mind would do that? Well, maybe if they need food, maybe this is the only chance they've had.
Well, and I'm the creepy lady in the store who's like, can I help you? Can I hold him while you get your grocery? And they're like, who is this strange lady offering to hold my baby? But I really want to help you. I remember those days.
And it's hard. And
it is so hard. Yes. Yeah. And I think that goes back to also the family culture and your rhythms and routines and just how important. I think there are a lot of misconceptions and myths around sleep. And I think that some of our problems with sleep and fussiness and all of that and our difficulty there is because we don't have a rhythm and a routine. And I think children thrive on, that's why they want to read the same book. I want to read the same book. I want you to sing me the same songs. I want, they want to have like that predictable routine. And so when you create, we have bath time and we sing songs as we get soapy, and then we get, dried off and we brush our teeth and we read our book and we sing 3 songs and we, and they get into that rhythm, and that establishes good sleep hygiene. And so, those things can help in the younger years, especially, to just have those predictable rhythms and routines. And there are times when, maybe a parent is sick or a child has a chronic illness. Like, there are so many circumstances in our lives. Again, it's the ideal, it's the everyday life that can keep us from having those consistent routines. So if you are in a season where it feels more chaotic, like, please give yourself grace and establish whatever little routine and rhythms that you can, knowing that you will get back into a routine and a rhythm. And especially like when you have a new baby at home, like, whoo, that kind of throws all the rhythms and routines. But there are some things that you can kind of keep going to help get through that time. But do you want to talk about sleep?
Yeah, we can definitely talk about sleep. Speaking of sleep, that reminds me of how disorienting and difficult and just chaotic it was when we brought our first daughter home from the hospital. Gretchen, you were saying, like, in our intro, you were talking about how crazy it was when they let you leave the hospital. And I think Carrie and I had that exact same conversation, putting Amelia in the infant carrier into the Jeep Cherokee, and him looking at me going, they're really going to let us leave with her, aren't they? It's like, yep, they are. When I was pregnant with our first daughter, I read all the books, and people are very kind and generous and they want to help. And so they give you the books that worked for them. And a book that a very well-meaning friend had given me was very formula based. And particularly the part of the book that I really focused in on was on sleep training for very teeny tiny babies. And I tried to follow this book to the letter, and I was not getting the results that it said that I should. And I was hearing that my baby has to learn how to soothe herself, and that if I, do certain things, pick her up too much, pick her up every time she cries, if I do that, then I'm not teaching her how to settle herself. And it really made me crazy. And it made us crazy between me and Carrie, because he very much felt like it was awful. And he was like, she's a tiny new baby. This isn't, she doesn't know how. We're supposed to hold her. And she's crying and screaming. And I'm going, I don't think we are. This is what the book says. And so the book is Babywise. And I'm still really, I'm always surprised when I still hear new to parenting couples say that that's the book that they've followed and that's the plan that they're using. And I really just say, I don't trash the book, but I do say our experience with that book was really difficult. And God has given you instincts as parents that are going to push up against what this book says. And you need to choose your instincts. If your baby is screaming, crying, even if you know that they're dry and they're fed, just pick them up. Hold your baby close.
Yes.
It should not feel like you are ripping your heart out when you are doing what a book says. You are ignoring. I felt like I was ignoring what my body, my heart, my mind were telling me to do as a mother. I was ignoring that because somebody had given me a book that worked for them. And especially and later on we did get into some good sleep rhythms apart from that book. And it just kind of naturally fell into place because I was able to just observe what my baby needs and what happens after she eats and what happens after she's changed. You're able, your brain as a mom is wired to notice these things and to provide care in a way that tends your baby's needs and provides peace. It should not be this kind of chaotic, overwhelming, conflict-inducing, what's the word?
Stressful.
Continuously stressful process when you're supposed to be enjoying your new little baby.
Yes.
It really caused a lot of stress between me and my husband, and I wish I had listened to him.
And it's caused a lot of stress in babies who don't get fed as frequently as they need to be fed. And, there's so much research and evidence on attachment and connection and just having that physical connection, the distance of when you're holding a baby, the distance, that they can see your face and your eyes and that connection. So I think one of the myths or misconceptions is that your goal with a new baby is to get them to sleep. Yes, sleep is a beautiful thing. But I think letting new parents know, like, you're not going to have regular sleep for a while. It's going to take a while. And your goal with a newborn is not to get them to sleep through the night. Newborns should not sleep through the night. Like, they need, their little stomachs are the size of their fist. They need frequent feedings, and God has designed them for that connection, that frequent feeding, so that they can go through this rapid body growth and brain growth. I mean, so much in that first year of life. Oh my goodness, they grow so much. So I just cringe when I hear people ask parents of newborns, how are they sleeping? Like, no, don't ask that. No. Don't do that.
Because that can also make, if sleeping isn't going well, and that could be from a variety of reasons.
Yes.
It's not always just that the mom is being inconsistent or that the mom doesn't know what to do. The baby could be colicky. The baby, there could be all kinds of different things.
Yes.
So you can't, I don't know, that's not a great metric. And moms already, especially new moms, they already feel that pressure to be making all of the things happen the way that they're supposed to, when they're supposed to, being like really fixated on schedule. And you just really cannot, you can't do that to yourself. And if we remind new moms of that, like it's already in their minds, they're already thinking of it. I feel like it's important for our listeners, for me to just remind our listeners too, that Gretchen is speaking from a place of training as a pediatrician. And so I'm always grateful for your voice in that. And I, like when you talk about brain development and sleep schedules and, their little tummies being the size of their fist, that's so tiny.
It is so tiny, right?
Another thing that when you were saying all that, another thing, talking about how frequently babies have to eat, it also reminds me, like, that's how frequently a baby needs to be touched and held and connected with. And they need to smell the mom. Like, there's like smell things that are happening. And when a mom smells her little baby, the brain produces oxytocin. Like, our bodies just do these incredible things to bond us to our children. And the more like hands off we are with them, which is kind of what I thought I was supposed to do in the beginning, we really miss out on that attachment. And I do feel like we've seen maybe some effects from that, not having as intense or as secure of an attachment as I feel like we could have had, because I was resisting what my instincts were telling me for the sake of following a formula that really just made me crazy.
Yeah.
So if I do see that book out somewhere, I hide it or I toss it.
Yes, there are some books that I will buy at like the library used book sale so I can get rid of them. But and that may be one of them. So yes, I am not a proponent of the sleep training cry it out method. And you may be, and we're not going to say that there is a formula and that we are the ultimate authority, but if that doesn't sit well with your heart, know that it is not a requirement, just like the first time obedience. Along the lines of sleep, we can go from a newborn to a teenager. Because there's a lot of difference in the teenage brain also. And there's been a lot of newer research, which not even that new, but I think it's just becoming more mainstream as far as people reading about it and understanding it, is that as teens are developing and growing and they have changes in their brains, that they actually stay up later and want to sleep later. And it's not a rebellious thing, and it's not a manipulative thing. It is a brain development thing. And there have been a lot of studies, and there's a lot of push for high schools and middle schools to start later because we are, and a lot of times with like bus schedules and things like that of schools, that they will have the older kids start even earlier. So some of these kids are getting to school at 7:30 in the morning, and it is just not the best thing for their brain and their sleep and their growth and all of that. So if you are noticing, if you have teens and you're noticing that they want to stay up later and they're kind of more productive later and more talkative later, as much I would recommend, which, in my humble opinion, that if you can arrange things to allow for some later evenings and some later bedtimes, if there is the margin, because they do need sleep. So if they are one of the kids that has to be at school at 7:30, it's not going to work. But, if you can let them stay up later and sleep later, it really fits more naturally with their brain development. And an added benefit as a mom, if you can stay up later with them, you will get some sweet discussions most likely, because it's really when they are ready to talk and have those meaningful conversations. And those opportunities are less and less as the older they get. So then they move away from home. So those can be sweet times. Sleep, so much myth and misconception around sleep. And I like that it's becoming more mainstream to look at what children need and what their brains need. And newborns need connection, attachment, cuddling, snuggling, feeding, changing. Reading to a newborn is another very soothing thing. And I remember even reading aloud to them books that I was reading. Aww. But I wanted to read, so I would read. I'm like, who knows if they picked up on all those. They were hearing Sally Clarkson's words from the time that they were little babies.
A couple more that I definitely want to touch on. One is about cultural norms, and the other one is about developing friendship with our children. Regarding the cultural norms, and I feel like we have dealt with this specifically regarding devices and social media access. But if something has become a cultural norm, the myth is that we don't really have permission to do things differently, or that we are alienating our children if we choose to do things differently. And I will tell you that if you feel conviction about a boundary or a limitation, whether it's regarding social media access or certain people that you allow your child to interact with, or gaming platforms, if you feel a conviction about that, I would say to dig into that and just try to find information or research or resources online or books that help you feel confident in that decision. And then if you are married, you and your spouse try to get on the same page with that, and then talk to your teen about it, or your children. We see children of all ages now, with their devices, and even babies who cannot even walk yet, holding a phone in the grocery store. I'm certain that there's research out there that is going to tell us that that is not wise. So I would just say, if you really kind of have a feeling in your gut that something isn't right, but you're not confident enough to draw the boundary or to make that decision, or maybe you and your spouse are not on the same page, take some time to just learn and advocate for your convictions, and see, okay, is what I'm learning, is the research, are these voices that I trust, are they aligning with what my gut is telling me? And then have the conversation with your spouse if that's part of your family.
I think that's great. And it reminds me also of like even something as kind of basic as preschool. I think children going to preschool is a very cultural norm. And people just expect, okay, they're 2 years old, they should go to preschool. They have to learn how to do all these things before they go to school. And that was a cultural norm that we were just questioning, like, why, which kind of eventually led us down the homeschooling path. But I like that you touched on the fact that even if you fear that it could alienate, your children, I think to lean into those fears of why do I fear that? Preschool is not a mandate. It is not.
Right.
So I think feeling the freedom to think outside of the box and, like you said, to trust your instincts. I think that's so good.
The second one that I had mentioned is about developing friendship with your children, and this myth that is going to somehow undermine or relinquish your authority in that relationship. And I had a conversation with Lucy last night where she just really reminded me again that it does the opposite. And of course, she's, both of our girls are still teens. They live at home. We're responsible for them. We set the boundaries. They're given, a lot of freedom to make social decisions and what they do with their time, what they help themselves to in the kitchen, even though, I'm usually I'm the one shopping at the store. Now Amelia can go to the store herself and get whatever she wants. But the idea that even like while our children are still home, if we have authority over their lives, there's a myth that we shouldn't be friends with them because that's going to make them think that we're on the same level and that we're peers. And somehow that myth has really become ingrained in a lot of families. And I'll even say that's something that Carrie and I have had to kind of try to align ourselves with. But Lucy said last night that she said that if a teen does not feel respected as a person by their parent or by somebody that is leading, some kind of event or a sport that they're in or a class, if a teen doesn't feel respected by that person, it breaks down their ability to really receive the leadership that adult is offering. And she said, maybe this is kind of new to you, Mom. And I said, actually, babe,
oh, I love that.
When I was in college getting my education degree, I remember hearing all the time, and our listeners have probably heard this, they don't care how much you know until what? Until they know how much you care. I don't think a child is ever going to get confused about who the adult is in the room or in the home. The difference is going to be, do I feel safe enough to trust your leadership? Do you see me as a person? Do you meet my needs? Do you discount my needs? Do you overlook my personhood? Do you disregard my opinion or my voice? And that doesn't always mean giving regard for a child's opinion or their voice or their needs or preferences. That doesn't mean that you're obligated to bend to that. Right. Or to answer the way that they want you to. But you hearing them communicates value and personhood. And if the answer is no, you can communicate that in a way that's humane and respectful. I know you really want to fill in the blank, but we just can't right now. And I'm really sorry. I don't want you to feel left out. I know that's maybe embarrassing for you to have to leave before everybody else. But maybe this is the wrong decision, but I just really feel like you're supposed to leave by this time. And if you want to keep talking about it, I'm here to listen, but that decision isn't going to change. And we do not get that conversation right in our home all the time. A mistake that I have made a lot in our home is allowing a conversation to continue after I have communicated a boundary. And what I have not done is clarify that my decision isn't going to change. But because the conversation is continuing, my child thinks that there's still an right. They still think that we're negotiating and that maybe I'm going to be swayed. And so they're frustrated that I'm not changing my mind. And I'm frustrated that they're continuing to talk. And so we're both frustrated. So I finally realized I need to go ahead and communicate up front. I'm not changing my mind, but I'm still happy to listen. And sometimes things just kind of fizzle out after that. Right. Sometimes they don't, and they're just really frustrated. But if you feel convicted about something, about a boundary, I guess this kind of goes back to the other one. It's okay to assert that. But the friendship part is where you are, even with our girls now, they're both teens, still having elements of friendship that I'm trying to weave more into the fabric of our relationship, because as they get older, our friendship is going to be what's left. And I want to be able to depend on that.
Right.
I want that to last long after they need me to pay their cell phone bill and their car insurance and the groceries. Like, I want that to be there. That's all that will be left.
And I think it also goes back to how you define friendship. And I think,
Yes.
Going back to our friendship series, I would encourage you to listen to that too, because it really, friendship isn't complete permission to do whatever you want to do.
Right.
Even in our friendship, we hold each other accountable. We sharpen each other. I can't do whatever I want to do. And because you're my friend, you kind of give me permission. No, like there are boundaries in friendship. There are expectations in friendship. There's relationship there. So I think you have to think about, what does it mean to be a friend?
Right. Healthy friendship.
Yes. And that's what you want for your children with you, because, you are developing that friendship. I love that.
And I think also, like teens particularly, well, even our girls when they were younger, they had some hard friend things. In the moments that I share with our children where they are sort of friendship oriented, like if we go and have lunch together, or if we go on an errand together, or if we're picking out a gift for somebody, for someone's birthday or whatever, things that don't really involve boundaries, I think it's maybe easier to kind of pull that out and be like, this is kind of a friendship moment. And also being intentional to create those friendship moments.
Yes.
I want our kids to know this is what healthy friendship feels like, because they've experienced unhealthy friendship. Well, why? Because they're friends with immature people. They are immature people. Sometimes they even misunderstand, and then things with friends are hurtful. But I want to set that example for this is what a healthy friendship looks like. And also friendship being modeled between you and your spouse if you're married. But I think Carrie and I were not on the same page with the friendship part for a long time. And that doesn't just mean like we're buddies and I say all of the Gen Z terms and, try to convince them that I'm just like them and that I'm cool. Like they know I'm not cool.
Right.
And they know it's ridiculous when I say some of this stuff. So if I do it, it's more just to be funny. But they're not confused about who the mom is and who the dad is.
Right. Oh, that's so good. So we're going to wrap up myths and misconceptions with the bombshell.
We're going to drop it. Is this what everybody's been wondering if we're going to mention it?
Probably. I don't know anything.
It's the S word. You're going to say it?
Should you spank your children?
You said it.
I think there is a myth and a misconception that Christian parents must spank their children. And physical discipline is a requirement. And I honestly had thought that this myth and misconception had kind of died off. But from some of our conversations, we are finding that with parents of young children that this myth is not died off, and that it is still quite pervasive. And I will say, I think that is a myth. I do not believe that physical punishment is a requirement. I do not believe it is a biblical mandate. I think if parents are using physical punishment, that it is extra biblical. I said it.
Would you say that it is unbiblical?
I would venture as far to say yes. It is not. It is not Christ-like behavior. It is not a Christ-like consequence. Can I say that?
You said it. And I second it. I cannot imagine the hands of Jesus touching a child in a way that is harmful, that would harm them. And I bought into the spanking when Amelia was really incredibly young, because a lovely book had suggested it.
So you bought
I
because
did.
of a book?
Because of a book. There was a wooden spoon. Isn't that horrible? And Amelia couldn't say her S's, and so she called it the fankin' phone. Isn't that horrible?
That is so precious, little Amelia.
And sad,
yes.
I'll never forget the book that I was given, again, well-meaning friend. even advocated for spanking the bare bottom of a child who is still in diapers if they flipped over on the changing table. And I did that. And that was horrible. The way that she would look at me, and it came out of nowhere. She didn't know what to expect. I thought that it was like training, like the Pavlov's dog. They flip over, the spank, and then they realize when I flip, I really have this sting on my hiney out of nowhere. I'm never going to do that again. And I can tell you that is not the result. And Carrie did not agree with it. Interestingly, like he tended to be the one that was more soft-hearted and patient and pick the baby up, and I was the one reading these crazy books that was telling me to ignore what my gut and my heart were saying, but I thought that I was doing the right thing. It went on long enough that Amelia was old enough to speak, and she didn't want to brush her teeth at one point. The bathroom was upstairs, and I said, I've got the spanking spoon. When we were downstairs, I said, I've got the spanking spoon if you don't go up and brush your teeth. Well, then we ended up upstairs, and I had one upstairs as well. And when we got up there, she saw the other one. She said, you have 2 spanking spoons.
Oh, precious.
But I thought, why? Why am I doing this? And it wasn't long after that we just said, this feels wrong. This is wrong. These are kids. They're just learning. We're not doing this. It just did not feel right. I was spanked as a child, very rarely, but I was, and it never helped. It was just one of those things where, as a parent, you think you're just doing whatever you can, whatever you think is going to work to teach your child to trust you and obey you. And I even have had a conversation not that long ago, within the past year, with a parent of a young child. She was probably 2.5 at the time that we had this conversation. And he said that they spank when there's disobedience, because what if she runs out in the road and doesn't listen to me? And I hear that argument. I hear that response when spanking is questioned, when physical punishment is questioned. People sometimes will say, well, I need my child to listen to me if there's an emergency. If there's an emergency, you need to have your child by your side, and you need to do whatever you can. But in that moment, I just felt my heart broke, but I did not feel permission to say, there's another way. That you do not have to justify striking your child for fear of them also getting hurt. Like, right. I didn't feel permission to say it, but every time I think of that, I think I just can't reconcile those two in my heart. And I just really cannot imagine the hands of Jesus striking a child for the purpose of teaching them. I mean, of all of the people that Jesus taught, we do not have any record of scripture saying that he struck them for the purpose of teaching. Not even Peter.
And if you want more discussion of the biblical term, the rod, I would highly recommend Heartfelt Discipline. It is such a great discussion of the rod and the Hebrew meanings and all the context. So we won't get into all of that here, but just if you want more of a theological discussion of why we believe it is not a biblical mandate, that is an excellent book. There is just something that was in our heart with, especially having a lot of boys who were very physical, and to think, so if they hit their brother, I'm going to hit them to tell them, to show them that hitting is not right. Like it just it doesn't compute. And I think a lot of children who maybe are out of the box, or there's some children I think who aren't as necessarily as naturally compliant with boundaries as other children are. And I have heard a lot of parents say, well, like spanking doesn't, a little spank doesn't work with it. Like you have to break their spirit or break their will. And you think a child that is already, their temperament is not necessarily a boundary respect, like the level of physical discipline that people could end up, it's From my pediatrics background, I saw a lot of abuse, way more abuse than I anticipated or could even imagine. It is easier to really harm a child with adult strength that you don't realize you have, especially in those moments. It doesn't take a whole lot of adult physical strength to really harm a child. And so I just encourage parents, if you are feeling out of control, if you are feeling anger and frustration and all of those feelings and are using physical discipline, I just encourage you to take a step back and really pray and think about, like you said, Jennifer, is this what Jesus would do? It has been good to talk about these myths and misconceptions, and I don't think we're finished, are we?
I don't think we are. I feel like we keep thinking of more things. And this has been such a huge part of our friendship.
Yes.
For so many years. And it feels, in a strange way, having these conversations in a way that the world can have access to them. It almost feels like I have this image of like bringing in the harvest, but like putting it out to share or somehow provide. I don't know why that image is coming to mind, but
it's like taking our fish and loaves and like breaking it apart and sharing it with,
And there are going to be some people who don't want it. And that's okay. I don't feel like we've been called to convert everybody.
Right.
We're just sharing.
And I think so much of our heart behind it is there is no formula. It is, what is your family culture? What is your personality? And what is the atmosphere of your home? And it's such a unique thing for each family. But I think releasing parents from the burden of thinking these myths and misconceptions are mandates and requirements and essentials. Like you said, you wish someone had given you permission to not follow the book.
Because I didn't trust myself.
Yes. Yeah. So what do you think about continuing with another episode of myths, misconceptions, and mistakes? Because we have a lot of mistakes that we haven't touched on.
I know. Well, I think it's safe to say that there will be a part 2 to this conversation, and we hope that you'll join us. And thank you for finding a moment. We'd love to hear from you. If you have questions, please contact us through social media or send an email through the podcast link. And thanks for finding a moment with us.